Well, I just left the post office this morning, dropping off some seeds, and bumped into a guy in the parking lot who goes, "Do you do YouTube videos?" Yeah, it turned out I'd actually spoke with him recently. He is a transplant from Oahu over here. Has recently purchased property in Hawaiian acres, I think it was. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and I've had some conversation with him, I guess, on comments on the internet. Well, he had thanked me for the videos, said he watched them before they moved over here, and it inspired him, and blah, blah. But then he asked me why I don't do videos on food forests. And I told him, well, basically it's because I don't do permaculture in that regard, and not in the same way, at least, because I don't consider most of the crops that these permaculturists eat as being food. Yeah, I'm pickier than that. I don't like katuk, for instance, I don't really care for New Zealand spinach. Mexican spinach is horrid. You got to boil the poisons out of it before you could even eat it. My permaculturist always trying to feed me scarlet runner beans, for instance. Oh, that has got to be the worst thing that looks like a green bean on earth. It's that as if you want to eat a green pod. The flowers are gorgeous. If there's hummingbirds around, which we don't have in Hawaii anyway, they like the flowers. And I guess the hard bean, it's quite attractive, the hard bean. It's pretty, speckles and all, and I guess it's okay cooked, that hard bean. But man, the green pod, oh, no. It's like eating an old piece of shoe. Yeah, so therein lays the problem with me, is that, at least more than half of my diet is in standard vegetable produce. Cabbages, cucumbers, onions, broccoli, tomatoes, peppers, all that kind of stuff. I have a few somewhat more exotic vegetables like yacon that I grow, or roselle, for instance, fruiting hibiscus, where we use it for tea. They're a little bit more unusual than most of the mainland U.S. gardens, but still just vegetables out here, and all of them really prefer to be grown in open settings, more or less in rows, heavily fertilized, and in full sun. And so they don't make food forest candidates very well. We have so few of our food crops that are actually shade-loving. Now, there are some exceptions to that. Blueberries will take a bit of shading. So will raspberries and blackberries, to a point. The pawpaw tree takes a bit of shading. I can grow the blackberries here. Some of the blackberry varieties will raise up here. Most raspberry varieties don't seem to do well here at all, with the exception of Mysore, the black raspberry from Asia. That one grows really well. Basically, we don't have a lot of choices on our standard food crops for things that work in forest-type settings. It's that simple. Then, when it comes to the fruit trees, so the fruit trees are, a portion of what I eat. They are not as important in my diet as the vegetable stuff is, with one exception, maybe two. Nuts and avocados are extremely important in my diet. They provide fats, they provide protein, they provide a lot of things that don't usually come out of standard garden produce and don't come out of things like apples, oranges, and peaches, And so they're very important to me as a tree. Otherwise, I do grow a lot of other fruit crops. I don't have too many of the temperate ones anymore. I still have a few apple trees around here. I still have blueberries, and I have blackberries. Those are more temperate crops that I do have. None of those really like it too shady. The apple doesn't want it shaded at all. Okay, although there's a possibility around here you might trick out the apple's photo period and requirements by somehow planting it on the north side of a building or something. I'm sure there's a way a person can do that. I haven't found it yet, but on the other hand, I have found that most true tropical fruit crops, the vast majority of them don't appear to have been heavily cultivated in farm fields by farmers, except but maybe fairly recent. As we go back for hundreds of years, what we find is these fruits were generally harvested from the wild in a natural setting. And so they're not most plants that are really well adapted to the standard farm field culture. Now, exceptions there, citrus, which are really more of a subtropical, not so much a tropical. Citrus, it's been thousands of years in cultivation. Those plants, I don't feel, do very well at all in forest-type settings. I like citrus. I grow a lot of it. And so I grow my citrus with my vegetables. And so if you want to call that food foresting, I guess you can. I don't. It's just, I have a row of citrus. Goes right down the middle of the vegetable garden, and there's vegetables on both sides of it. But they're pretty much grown under standard agricultural conditions. Now, when it comes to things like the rambutans, the rolinias, let's see if I can think of a few of the others. Well, the mac nut actually, works foresty. Anyway, most of these forest-type fruit trees seem to work pretty well in forest settings. And so I do grow those in kind of a food forest setting. They're planted together like a forest. There's quite a bit of shade underneath there. I do, like, say, for instance, in coffee or cacao or on my avocados, I hang vanilla orchids, and so I have orchids growing on food trees, and the vanilla orchid is technically food. It's a seasoning anyway. We find that. I have patchouli grows well underneath a lot of my tropical fruit trees. So does ava. In mainland you call it kava, K-A-V-A. That's one of the local intoxicants, Polynesian intoxicants. It's also a medicinal herb that's used for sedating. That grows well underneath other plants. I grow mamaki tea, which is a local plant used for drinking tea. It's a medicinal herb. I grow that one in more of a foresty type setting. And so I do have crops planted that way. Coffee and cacao handle a certain amount of shading. On the other hand, papayas sure as heck don't. They love sun. The same goes with pineapples. And pineapples are one of the main crops that we actually raise here, and they don't raise in forest settings. You put too much shade on a pineapple, if you get a pineapple at all out of it, you're lucky, but if you do get pineapples, they're probably not going to be as sweet as the ones that were grown in full sun. And so, basically, just to answer the question, Bill, why don't you do videos on food forests? It's because I don't do food forests. That's why. It's real simple. I don't, like I said, I don't really see much value in this program except with trees that tolerate that kind of a setting. And so your pure tropical trees, most of them will work in sort of forest-like settings. But then finding other things that are good to eat that will grow under those trees, not so easy. It gets awful dark under most of them. A Rollinia is a big old thing, and I have successfully ran plants, vines, Amazonian vines, the shamanic herbs up into the trees like Diploteres carborana. That will coexist and actually get too aggressive. You know, some of the Amazonian herbs are understory plants, and so if you use any of those that are you know, generally applied to ayahuasca, those will all grow under fruit trees, or on fruit trees, or cover the fruit trees and completely eradicate them. Take your pick, you know. You know, lilikoi, the passion fruit, will scale a fruit tree. You could do that, but that's not my style, I tell you, man, because it'll just overrun a tree. You'll lose the tree. And it's hard to prune something that's way up inside of a tree. Now, it has the one advantage, and that is that the fruit drops. It has a fairly hard shell, and you can pick them up off the ground when they're ripe. So you don't have to go up to pick them. But, man, they ruin your trees. I've pulled lilikoi vines out of I don't know how many trees around here and gotten rid of them. Currently, my only one good planting of hybrid lilikoi is out on a weed mat all by itself up the hill over here. One plant has made a circle that is well over 50 feet in diameter. It's huge. And it's yielding like crazy. Picking them is going to be a little weird. I'm going to have to trip through there, you know, in my bare feet probably. But at least it's kept them from scrambling over everything else on the farm and completely burying it. Because that's what it does. When you put it into a forest setting, it'll grow there. But boy, it's tough to handle. Anyway, that's the brief answer to, Bill, why don't you do videos on food forests? Because I don't do food forests, that's why. What you see out here is what you get. Aloha all. Yeah, hang loose there.